Check 1, 2.
Go! Curious about real estate?
Yes!
Then you've come to the right place. Get the knowledge you need, get over the fear, and get started. This is the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show with your host, Michael Quarles.
Hello, investors. Michael Quarles here with episode number 2. Today's show, we're going to be talking to a gentleman who is just friggin' awesome. He has so much energy and so much to say and so much to help us with. I'd like to introduce everybody to Tom Krol. Hello, Tom.
Oh man, I love wholesaling.
Tell us about yourself and why you do what you do and how you do what you do and what you expect out of it and the roadblocks and how people can be you when they grow up. Anybody that would be listening to this, with the exception of like our friends and relatives who just want to hear us talk, really want to know where the magic is. You know, they want to uncover it and hold on to it, take it with them and have some security that because you've done it and you've presented it in a way that they believe that they can do it too, that there's a lot of trust and security in that so they can go out and fall forward. And that fall forward is making bucket loads of money.
Right. And they want the secret sauce, right?
And you know, one of the things, the only thing about real estate I'll say is one of the things that I have found about it is the way I do it isn't right and it's not wrong.
Right.
Someone else could be doing it completely different, completely opposite, and super successful, and nothing's wrong with that.
Absolutely.
I think it's a great business profession to be in.
I think, the good news for anyone listening out there is that here is the good news, in my opinion, is that there is no secret sauce. And I think that is really could sometimes be a roadblock for a lot of new people who are starting out as they think, Tom's doing something that I don't know about. He's got some secret formula. And I can tell you that from what I've seen and from my own experience, the best way to do this is to just do what everyone else is doing, and you'll get the same exact results, and just try not to reinvent the wheel at first. And there is no secret sauce. And I can also tell you some other good news, which is when I got started, I was fired from my sales job for the umpteenth time because I am not a good.
What, you didn't have enough energy or something?
Well, you know what? I'll tell you what. I had tons of energy, just no sales ability, and I think that that's also some good news because when you are doing this the right way, and this is something that obviously Yellow Letters helps me out with a lot, is that you are a deal finder. You're not a deal creator. So the good news again is that you don't have to be a good salesman to wholesale, which is what I'm really focusing on is wholesaling. So yeah, there's a lot of good news for anybody out there who's anticipating some secret formula or some extraordinary sales ability. And the good news is it's not required. So it's fantastic.
Can we back up a little bit?
Absolutely.
Before we get into the whole definition of what the secret sauce isn't, or the fact that there isn't one, who are you? What have you done? Where have you come from? Where do you want to go?
Okay, terrific. So here I am, Tom Krol, and here's what I do. I started off before I got into wholesaling, I was actually in lawn care, and I was doing the sales for a lawn maintenance company, and I was horrible. And I mean horrible. I mean, I literally went the last year of my job without making a single sale. Not a single sale, Michael.
Do you think that understanding that that's okay helped you get started into the real estate investment business? Because is there a time frame that you would say that a new investor would have to go through before they can actually quantify their hard work?
Well, I think that, specifically, I will tell you what I had when I first started. I'll tell you exactly. I was fired from my job, and I called my brother, Todd. He was in California, and he had pushed me into wholesaling. And I was worried, and I had that exact question. I said, Todd, if I get it, I said, first it took me a long time for him to convince me that wholesaling works in Florida and that I could do it and that it wasn't illegal and all that other good stuff. So one of my first questions were, how long is it going to take me to actually get some deals? And, to answer that question, specifically is mentally you have to just get there, that you have belief in wholesaling and that you have belief in yourself that you can actually do it. But I would say, with expectations, I would say, I have some students now, and I would guess, 3 to 6 weeks is probably the fastest turnaround time to actually get up and moving and start getting some deals under your belt.
That's not bad at all. Absolutely. Not bad at all.
Yeah, and to actually understand it, it's one of the things that, that one of the things that I believe is that if you really want to get up and running, the one thing that I tend to, I'll tell you from my own experience, this is what I've done. I always treated my mentor as an instruction manual, rather than a professor at college. So I didn't really want to learn wholesaling. I certainly didn't want to learn anything about real estate. Real estate actually doesn't interest me at all. I don't consider myself to be in the real estate industry. I consider myself to be in the pawn shop industry. So I know very little about real estate even still to this day. And right now, we're flipping tons of deals. And I don't, I get questions all the time on, things like the HUD. And I have no idea. I just tell me, I don't know. Talk to the title company. So, one thing I would suggest is that if you really want to get into wholesaling, like I did, is you take a mentor and you treat them as if you just bought a few pieces of furniture from IKEA, and you treat them as an instruction manual. And the first piece of furniture you put together is a desk, and you're really not going to know what you're doing, but you just go through the instructions and the desk comes out okay. And then after that, you have an armoire and you follow the directions, and now you're more familiar with the tools and you're more familiar with how to interpret the instruction, and you just go from piece to piece. And by the time you're done, you are an expert at building furniture from IKEA. And before you know it, you have a VA doing it for a few dollars an hour in the Philippines for you, which is fantastic. So it's great.
Well, I like the idea of the IKEA approach, but if I wanted to look for a furniture store, I could open up Google and I could go there and type in furniture or a name of a store and find it and actually walk through their front door and buy something. How do you do that with a mentor? How did you do that? How did you find that guy or gal or those guys and gals who actually said, I will take you under my wing and I will help you learn this business?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was very lucky in that sense. Todd is my brother, and he, the way he trained me is the way you would train a brother. And I think that is the way it has to be done. It's no holds barred, and it's down to brass tacks, and it's basically do what I tell you to do and don't ask a whole bunch of questions and don't try to understand what you're doing, because your education is going to come in the field. So I number one, I had the belief that I knew Todd was making money wholesaling, so that I didn't have a problem with. Sometimes, people will you have to ask the person you're learning from, is this person actually wholesaling, and what kind of money are they making, and do I trust that information? So I kind of got over that right away because it was my brother. I also think that you basically have to you don't want to sit there and learn the information. You want to go out and do the information. I can remember when I first started, I was constantly telling Todd, we were getting literally into arguments, hey, you're pushing me and you're telling me to go out and meet with a motivated seller. I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't know the value of a house. You haven't taught me how to do valuations, and you're telling me to get a purchase agreement. What the heck? And we literally had, and believe me, it was, that's understated as far as what was going on the phone at that time. But I think that's really the best way to get started, is not to reinvent the wheel. Pick one mentor and then just basically do everything that they tell you to do, and just understand that you're going to get closer to your goals when you're taking action and you're out of your comfort zone. So when you feel like you don't know what you're doing, you're right on the right track.
One of the things that you just said is you had to get over the fact that you didn't know what you didn't know, or didn't know what you were doing.
Right.
Okay. So, it's always like everybody always describes, well, they're climbing the mountain. They can't see the other mountain they have to climb after they get to the top of the mountain they're on. Or the right. Phrase that I don't know what I don't know. How did you get over that? How did you have the fortitude to just go and say, okay, I believe Todd. He's my brother. I believe him. He said to go do this. I don't know what that meant, but I have to trust. How did you do that? And let's take Todd out of the equation for a second. How would you do that for somebody else? How could you
right.
convince, and how would someone else who's learning this be able to say, I can do that? What do they have to say that?
I think that's a great question, Michael. I think, to me, there is one consistent, overwhelming theme that I see with new people starting out and with myself that I saw starting out, which is one 4-letter word called grit. And I hope there's 4 letters in grit. But that is really, to me, what it takes. It's going to take grit, determination, and the right mindset and perseverance. I think that is the answer. If I would say more than anything, if I notice, what do I notice in the people who are doing it, getting it done, getting deals, and the people who are just starting and then they kind of fall by the wayside and they don't really ever get their first or even more importantly their second deal. And I think that it's grit that does it. I think that, I was always a CD student in school. I didn't even finish college. I was just okay at sales, but when I wanted something and I was interested in it and I was passionate about it, I was able to accomplish pretty much any goal I wanted to. And I think that really comes down to grit and determination, really more so than even education in real estate or wholesaling. I mean, I still to this day, I guarantee you most wholesalers know a lot more about wholesaling than I do. But I know for sure that I'm going to wake up earlier, I'm going to work harder, I'm going to get the contract, I'm going to be there first. And I kind of, I went a long time ago, I was listening to interviews on Biography, and they had an interview with Rachel Ray, who is, if you don't know, a big cook on the Food Network show. And they asked her, they said, Rachel, they said, how did you get to where you are? Because at that time, if I remember the interview correctly, she didn't even go to chef school, and she's a big chef on television. And she said, what I did was I outworked everyone else. I showed up earlier, I left latest, and it was really, that to me was the definition of having grit and going the extra mile. And when a motivated seller calls in and you call him and you get voicemail, you don't just move on to the next phone call. You send him a text message. And if he doesn't answer the text message, you go to his house. And if you can't find him at his house, you go to Intellis Premier and you call his sister-in-law. And it's that level of commitment. It's not the 100%. It's the extra 20% on top of the 100% that I really see defines most of the wholesalers that have mentored me or that I've learned from.
You just mentioned you go to a what to find the phone number?
Intellis Premier is a service that I use to try to find some of the family members or additional information on sellers. We'll typically use that on vacant houses or any mail that we get back. We'll actually, instead of skip tracing it, we use Intellis Premier to actually try to find some of those relatives or other people who might know what's going on with the property.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you find what's the percentage of the deals that you find from return mail or vacant houses or using that instrument?
It's I just started tracking that, so I don't have a good number for you. I know for sure that we have done a handful of deals that way, but we've been doing it intermittently, and we really haven't been. And this is something I'm usually very, very good about, is metrics and measuring all of my response rates and all of that. But this is something that it's kind of been hit or miss. So we just recently automated it, and I can certainly give you a follow up on exact percentages. I could say that we've been doing it occasionally over the past 2 years, and in that time we've probably found a handful of deals, somewhere from 3 to 7, something like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
I normally don't tell people to do that, but because I didn't realize there was a tool out there that would be one, easy to use, and two, cost effective. And everything can be cost effective as long as you make more money than the cost. So
Absolutely.
You talked a lot about being the first one there and working maybe the smartest and the hardest of all the people that are participating. When you do that, how do you have time to do all those other things, or is the time equation and doing all the other things out of the picture until you've conquered the goal of those first few houses or learning what you need to learn in order to do it on purpose?
Right. So when I was first starting off, I was doing everything myself, and that was an issue. I didn't have a lot of time, and I was actually missing a few deals here and there because of the time crunch and having to do everything from all the way from the channels of all the different channels of marketing I was doing, from bandit signs and bird dogs and direct mail and Craigslist and everything else that I was working on, all the way up until taking the call, meeting with the motivated seller, then preparing the deal to sell, and basically doing everything myself all the way up until the closing, and then holding the hand of the buyer and the seller up until for the transitional close. But I would say at this point, right now, I'm fortunate to have a team of VAs that handle most of that for me. I've actually created a very, very interesting system. I don't know if it's out there yet, but what I do with with my VA, some of your sellers may get a kick out of this, but what I do is I actually about a year ago I saw a movie with the kids, and it was called Mr. Popper's Penguins. Do you know it?
No.
Okay.
No.
So it's a silly Jim Carrey movie, but in the movie, there is Jim Carrey, his character has a personal assistant, and she literally just walks with him and has a clipboard. And I remember thinking, I said, that would be fantastic if I had something like that to keep me on target, to keep me on focus, where she could handle everything else or he could handle everything else, and I would be just focused in on the highest and best use of my time. And what I've been able to do is actually create that scenario with my virtual assistant, Lorena, who has just been absolutely fantastic. Right now, the way my day is structured is that I am 100% laser focused on selling, and that's the only thing I do. Lorena will send me an email. She handles all of my emails. All of the calls that come in go directly to voicemail. Anything that needs to be tasked to call, she'll send it to me in an email. I'll call it. I'll respond to her on an app called WhatsApp, which allows me to just leave a voice memo, and then she'll send me the next task. So I literally can be at the car wash, walking, at the gym, wherever, and I can choose whether or not I want to be plugged into my network and doing deals, or if I want to take a break for an hour or not. So it's a really interesting scenario I've been able to establish with her, and I will tell you, for me, that's really been a game changer, because now I'm laser focused on just acquiring properties, and everything else is pretty much left to Lorena, which is fantastic.
So I'd love to have a Lorena. Can I borrow her?
Absolutely.
Well, I actually have one. We call her Norma, and
okay.
She's probably the purest virtual assistant I can have, because I can actually see her and say hello to her every day.
Awesome.
But one of the things that have always made me the most nervous about virtual assistants is being the type A personality, where I want to do everything, or if I can't do everything, I want to see it being done on my behalf. And we have Odesk and some of those platforms out there that we can actually stay in touch with our virtual assistants. But the hardest thing for me to wrap my head around, and help me with this and help the folks that are listening, is how do you jump from being I want to do everything to letting it go to someone so far away that I don't know 100% with 100% certainty that it's going to be accomplished. And how many of those people did you have to go through to find the one magical person who is like a little mini me kind of person?
Here's some really good news. I've got an answer to that, and the reason I think that's good news is because I had struggled with exactly the same issue. And the short answer to your last question is you will have to probably go through one or two or three people to find the right person. But the answer really to me came in a book that I read by Michael Gerber called The E-Myth. And really what I found is that in order for me to be in control but not literally be there is manuals. And I can tell you, Michael, if you take a look at my business, and I'll send you a few manuals if you'd like for the show notes, but I have got manual after manual after manual for my business of every single system that runs in my business. And Lorena follows the manual. So for instance, if Lorena were to ever to leave, I have another person I can plug in to follow the manual. So the manuals are constantly up to date. The results of the manuals are measured, and the metrics we take a look at. I get a copy of reports, for instance, like a campaign report, something like that. And then we can tweak the manual to get better results. But I think the big difference is that when you are manual driven, you're not personality driven. And what that means to me is when I'm looking for a good VA, I'm not looking for a good person who's very smart and who can interpret information and who has, they could kind of be a mini me where they do what I would have just done intuitively. I'm looking for a person who follows direction, who understands directions and instructions, and who can interpret those properly and then execute those for the results that I want. So it starts with the hiring process and really putting Todd and I call it the gauntlet. We put a VA through a gauntlet. They have to do, hey, submit me your resume and make sure it's 2 pages. And I also want a quote about success, and make sure you submit it between 9 and 10 Pacific Standard Time. And we see who follows it. So it starts with the hiring process.
Do you make that hiring process and the gauntlet of things nearly impossible, or are you just making it strict enough to be possible for a majority of the people?
It's surprisingly very easy, and surprisingly most people don't follow it, and that those people are immediately eliminated. So if we say, if for instance, if I were to say, okay, let's, I want you to respond at this time and send this information, you would be surprised by the overwhelming majority of people who just don't even follow the simple instructions on during that process. They'll talk about things that we didn't ask for. They'll provide additional information or information that's outside of the bounds of what we were looking for. So it's really a matter of you having pig-headed discipline about really not going with your gut on who you hire and going with the person who follows the directions when you're going through that gauntlet. That to me is the key, because sometimes I'll see someone on a piece of paper and I'll say, oh man, this person is great. They don't exactly quite fit, but they have all this criteria. But we can make it work, and they have a great personality. And I think that's where I really ran into trouble early on. If you follow the instructions and you have somebody who can follow instructions and create manuals, and they are diligent and they're on time, that is typically who you're looking for a position like that.
So weird question, and somewhat personal.
Yeah.
With what you just said, I'm thinking about how I can internalize that and look at that for myself. So here's the question: within those rules, would you have hired yourself?
No. No.
And so let's expound on that. Why? How can you be so successful but not yet be the person you would want to hire?
Well,
and that's not a negative question, by the way. So if it comes across like that, I apologize to anybody who's listening. But I think it's real important that because I'm a Gerber fan as well, and one of the key components of being a Gerber fan is understanding that there's the technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur, and what role do you want to have in a business? And one doesn't mean you're good at the other. And in fact, typically, if you're good at being a technician, you're lousy at being an entrepreneur running a business. So why wouldn't you hire yourself?
Sure. Well, I guess what I should clarify is I wouldn't hire myself in that role. The reason being is that I have a very particular set of skills. And what I found early on is that my skills, were constantly being interrupted. I am a very particular, I have a very particular set of skills that allow me to exceed in one particular area of wholesaling. And what happens is, as my time was getting saturated with things that are not in my set of skills, like for instance, organization, detailed paperwork. I am not a detailed paperwork person. I'm constantly getting in trouble at the title company. This isn't signed. You didn't do this right. This is, you did the assignment agreement on a purchase agreement and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, nor am I interested in learning about it. So I would say that when you're in the hiring process for a VA, a lot of people say, well, what can I outsource? And they start with that question. I think that's the wrong question. I think the question is, you have to be really honest with yourself. What are you really good at? And what do you really suck at? And you have to find a person who can follow a manual to do what you're not good at. And I think that I will tell you, for me, one thing for me is I'm very easily distracted by other projects or other things that I want to do rather than what I have to do. So I needed somebody who could give me some structure and, for lack of a better word, discipline throughout the day to stay on point. And that's what I've been able to build with this structure with Lorena. So as far as the job that my assistant does, I couldn't do it because it requires a certain, particular set of skills that I just don't possess. But I know for sure if you get me in front of a motivated seller, I can get a very good price, and I can get the contract under contract, and I can sell it quickly to a cash buyer. I can flip the paper. So that's what I want to be doing throughout my day, and that's what that system allows me to do, is really stay on point.
So if I'm, let's assume like I'm like super organized, and I'm not, but let's assume for a second.
Okay.
I want to be in fantasy land here and say I am. And I can tell you where every receipt that I've received for the last 10 years it's categorized alphabetically by merchant, by, month, I know everything. When I go down to the title company, I tell them how to do it kind of thing. but I'm lousy. I get my hand shakes so much before I knock on that front door. My palms are sweaty. I can't do it. I've never done it. I don't know how to do it. I just I can't talk to people.
Right.
Can I buy houses?
Absolutely, yes. I actually have a student who's exactly like that. And what we ended up doing for her was exactly the opposite of what we did for myself. So one thing that I'm doing right now is the reason for all of these processes is because I really want to hire a home buyer, an acquisition manager, or somebody to actually go out and meet the motivated seller. So I have some more free time. And that part of developing this system has been to make sure that the salesman who comes in we're going to be using the highest and best use of his time or her time. So we had a student who was exactly the same way. And what we ended up doing is, now she did end up learning how to do deals. She's down in Palm Beach and she did do some deals, and she really wanted to do exactly the opposite. So what she did is she started where I started with outsourcing the paperwork, so to speak. She started with outsourcing the sales. And she created a scenario that I don't know if I would endorse, which is basically she found a good salesman from the car industry. She ended up splitting her deals 50-50. So the salesman does all of the selling and then she does all of the paperwork. I don't know if that's really the most effective system, but it works for her and she's certainly done a lot of deals. I will say this though, wholesaling, I believe, and she's proof of this, anyone can do it. Anyone can do it because, one thing I always say is you can't mess up a motivated seller lead. You really can't. And, it doesn't require you to be a salesman in order to flip houses.
We keep talking about wholesaling. I'm trying to think back of all the houses I've done, how many of those I could classify as wholesaling, and I'd have a lot of fingers left over on my hand.
Okay.
So, because I am absolutely not an expert in wholesaling. What is wholesaling? Why do that? Why make that the component of, or the definition of that's what I do in the real estate investment world? Tell folks what the advantages are, maybe some of the disadvantages if there are, and why they should, if they should, enter our industry that way.
Oh man, I love wholesaling. So now this is a great subject because I will tell you what, wholesaling is, let me tell you what it is in my definition. Wholesaling is a pawn shop for houses. So what is a pawn shop for houses? We find sellers who need to sell right away for whatever reason, job loss, job relocation, divorce, whatever it is. And they want a fair, fast cash offer for their home. So they want cash in their hand right away. They want the time to be able to sit there and not have to move out right away. They don't want to spend money fixing up the home. They don't want to deal with agents. That's what they want. So we want to find those people, which as a side note, Yellow Letters is awesome at helping me do that. And what we do is we take that home, we put it under an assignable purchase agreement, and then we take that piece of paper and we show it to our cash buyers and we say, hey, whoever wants to pay me the most money for this piece of paper is going to be able to buy this house for 60 or 70 cents on the dollar. And that's basically what wholesaling is it's flipping paper. And that's why I really relate it more to a pawn shop. I never actually buy the home. I will occasionally do what's called a double closing where I do have to buy it and then I flip it to someone else and I will resell it. But 99 times out of 100, I will get a piece of paper that is a purchase agreement that's assignable, and I will assign that piece of paper for a fee. Typically, right now, I try to stay above $10,000 per deal, and we've been really good about that lately. So that's fantastic. But that's basically wholesaling in a nutshell, I would say. And to me, it's really.
Wait a second. You're making $10,000 every time you turn a house, and you're not responsible for anything?
It's unbelievable, Michael. Let me just tell you, when I was working at my sales job, my dead-end sales job, I was making about $50,000 a year. I now make that almost per month, just about. I sometimes go a little bit below it, but I sometimes go over it also. For instance, the last 2 months here. And yes, the answer is we are not.
Wait a second. You must be doing something illegal if you can make what you made in a year in a month.
I cannot believe it's not illegal.
No, it's fantasy land, or it's the hype that everybody says they, trying to tell people they can make unreasonable amounts of money doing something that you dictate your time doing. How can you even sit there and say that?
Right. I know, it's unbelievable. I mean, this business is so incredible. It's such a blessing, and I'm so glad that my brother brought me me into it. And now I'm able to train people, and I have such a high, almost 100% success rate, not to toot my own horn, but with my students, because I train them the way I was trained. And it's the most incredible business. It's the most incredible business out there that I can think of. It's fun. It doesn't require any money at all to get started. You never actually have to buy the home. You're just simply flipping paper. And I will put anybody to test on this, that grit, determination, and perseverance will outsell somebody with money every single time. So you don't need money. So anybody who's out there telling you, oh, you need a ton of cash to get started in wholesaling, that's not true, because you can find motivated sellers.
So what's the definition of a ton of cash?
A ton of cash, to me, I would think without any money at all, you could do a $10,000 flip within a month and a half wholesaling. And I'll tell you, I had a student, and this is a great story. I had a student who had no money. He had no money for postcards. He had no money for bandit signs. So he got onto Craigslist. I said, well, listen, I want you to start cold calling on Craigslist. So I didn't hear from him, and he said, okay. I heard from him about a week later. It was maybe the end of that same week, and he called me up, and he was just wah 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 wah. There's no everybody on Craigslist is an investor, and there's no sellers, and everyone's an agent, and there's no deals, which I know this not to be true. So I let him go on, and then I said, okay, I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to embarrass him, but I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. I said, I want you to just change one thing. I want you to change your mindset on one thing. And he said, what's that? And I said, I want you to pretend that you're sitting at a Starbucks with your family. He was a family guy with kids. I said, I want you to pretend you're sitting at a Starbucks with your family. A van pulls up, some guys jump out, and they grab your wife and your children, and then they drive away. He says, okay. And I know this is crazy, so just follow me here for a second. And I said, okay, now the next day you get a phone call from those guys, and they say, okay, in order to get your family back, you're going to have to wholesale a deal for $10,000. And I said, how fast do you think you're going to have that wholesale deal? He's like, right away. And I said, great. I said, that's how I want you to approach Craigslist. And he tried, and he did a $14,000 assignment in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Which is fantastic. So I love it. But that's why I say, you really don't need any money to get started in wholesaling. It's an absolutely awesome business, and you could do it really I don't want to say in any location, but as long as you have, I guess you could do it in any location, but you do need some people living in a town. So if you're in the middle
Alaska
of
may be harsh.
Yeah, Alaska. Hawaii might be a little tough too, because I'm sure the price points out there are high, but I'm sure you could do it there too.
Well, speaking of that, what kind of goals should you set for yourself as you enter this business?
I would say that, a reasonable goal would be, or what I would more define, I guess, as an expectation is one thing, or a piece of advice, I should say, is that what I would say is when you're getting started in this business, it's very, very important to reinvest the profit that you make from your first few deals into your company, almost 100%. And what I would recommend definitely would be direct mail. I would say that to me, it is absolutely the most consistent producer of motivated sellers. No other channel, and I have I have 8 fat and healthy marketing channels right now for motivated sellers. There is no other channel that produces the results like that. So I would say a really good early goal would be to get your first deal and eat ramen noodles and sell your couch and your television, and don't save any of the money from your first deal and pour it all right back into direct mail as soon as you can, because this business is for real. It works. It produces insane results. And if I would say that would be a basic goal. My first primary goal would be to make enough money to continue to market this business and put direct mail out there.
So if say, for instance, I'm brand new and I came to you and I found you and I asked you to help me. But here are my qualifications. I don't want it to jeopardize my lifestyle. I have a 9-to-5 and a weekend job, and I don't have any money. Am I a candidate?
Well, no. And what I mean by that is that I think that when you have this business will disrupt your lifestyle. But I can't.
I have to. My kids play baseball on the weekends, and I work too late, and then I have the day job on Saturday, and I can't do that. And I like my lifestyle.
Well, it's funny. I have some students who sometimes will come in, and I say it's like the enthusiastic student. That's what I call them. And I won't actually bring them on, and I'll tell you why, because they'll say things like that. when they talk about real estate, they talk about the benefits of being a wholesaler or a real estate investor or a flipper or whatever they're interested in. And they'll talk about how you can create your own schedule and how you're free to come and go as you want and you make a lot of cash and all of this good stuff. And the problem is that they're not looking at the first side of this, which is this business is very simple, but it is absolutely not easy. And if you're not willing to stay up later and wake up earlier and sell your couch and television for postcard money and crawl in the dumpster at Walmart for cardboard and go to the lumberyard and beg for some sticks of wood to make your own bandit signs if you're out of cash, if you don't have the time or energy level to do that, and you don't have money, I mean, the best you could hope for, I think, would be to bird dog for somebody, and just if you know someone who's selling, you might be able to make a few dollars. But I know, to me, it's a game changer, but you've got to be willing to put the time in the front end. And I have students who have full-time jobs. You can definitely do this with a full-time job, but it's something that you have to realize up front there's gonna be a lot of work up front. You've got to be willing to make those sacrifices.
Always, or is it just for the few people that need to make those? So can I just start and see how it goes?
No. I think, you've got to, I always say that, you don't want to put your big toe in the water. So you've got to be 100% committed to have your lifestyle disrupted a little bit. I might tell a student, for instance, he'll say, well, I have a motivated seller, but I'm going to go there at 6:00 because I can't get there. I'm at work. And I'll say, well, why don't you skip lunch and you go during your lunch break because they're only 10 minutes down the block. I literally just recently had this conversation with a student. So that's the kind of level of commitment I'm looking for my students to succeed. And that's what I had when I started out. And, it was a struggle when I started out, but I think that's the level of commitment that I'm looking for from people to start.
I always equate time as money. So when someone says you don't have to spend any money to do something, well, I always say, yeah, but I'm spending my time, so my time's worth money. And so if I don't have any money, as long as I have that 4-letter word, as long as it's only 4 letters, grit and determination, and I'm willing to do the dumpster diving, and I'm willing to find the stakes, and I'm willing to sacrifice and say, I'm not going to go to the restaurant that I can spend $80 on dinner tonight because $80 will get me, 200 postcards or whatever it is.
Exactly.
I'm willing to do that. So I'm willing to do that. What's my next step? How do I do it now that I'm willing to do it?
Well, I think that, and I'm not, I think it's very important, and it's been my own experience, to find someone either locally or someone that you trust, and you hire that person to show you the business. A mistake that a lot of newbies make is they find 4, 5, 7, 8 people who are successful, and what they do is, instead of following one plan, they'll listen to multiple things and they'll listen to multiple sources, and they'll scrape what I call like little pearls of wisdom from everyone, and they'll try to formulate their own plan. Early on, when we first started the podcast here, you said that you do real estate and maybe don't do it the right way, but you do it your way and it works, and there's other people who are doing it other ways. The thing is that you and I may be investing differently, but we're doing it very specifically. So it would be a mistake for someone to get 50% of their information from you and 50% of their information from me, and then try to put that together into some unique way of doing that. And I know that this industry attracts type A personalities, and that everyone is kind of a cowboy and they want to go off on their own, and that's great. But I would suggest that you do your first 50 or 75 deals following the instruction of one.
Wait. So I have to make $500,000 first?
Well,
$10,000 a piece?
Yeah. It's funny. I would tell you that anytime that when I was first starting, that I would try to go off on my own with these ideas, I would, number one, get distracted. It would take me away from the core drivers of my business, and it would not be as effective as I was hoping. What I would say is that your first few deals are not going to be as profitable as your latest deals, typically, because when you first start, I know when I first started, my deals were very small. But I would say you need a good, healthy chunk of deals and experience under your belt before you start going off and experimenting with, different things. Now, if you do want to try something new, I'm all for it, but I would suggest that you do it and you measure your results and you make sure that you're actually tracking, what you're supposed to be doing.
And that it's not an accident, and that you can duplicate it and make it be on purpose.
Absolutely.
It's ethical, moral, and legal. So, one of the things I hear from a lot of folks, and I'd be interesting to get your take on this, is time management as it deals with the phone call.
Right.
We have the sellers don't ask us when we want them to call. They just call when they want to call. So how does that new person who's got the full-time job that's now is going to have grit and sacrifice and determination, what do they do about getting over that mental hurdle of the phone call and making time for it?
I think that if in this business I've learned a lot of lessons, and I can tell you one is sense of urgency with the phone calls. My own personal experience has been I have a very strict adherence to this rule, which is all phone calls go to voicemail. There's no exceptions. We don't do live answer. When I call people back, I want to be calm, relaxed in front of my database and have a game plan in front of me and have some information in front of me. So I will tell you, if you take too long to call back a very motivated seller, there's a very good likelihood that you're going to lose that deal, especially in a competitive market. That's from my own experience. I think that you have to have a sense of urgency when that call comes in. To go over it specifically, my calls come into a voicemail system. The reason we do that is because it's sort of like a filter process. If they listen to my very short voicemail and they don't leave a message and hang up, we actually don't call them back. We only call back people who leave some information. That will go into my database first. All phone calls first go into the database, which we use High-Rise HQ. Then when I'm in front of my computer, I will call them back. I've had some salespeople and bird dogs work for me, or they'll call them back. And what we'll do is we'll just go and get all the information into the database. With this new arrangement now with my assistant, I can really be anywhere. The information pops up on my phone and I send a WhatsApp message back to my VA and I can tell her what the next task is to schedule in High-Rise for this particular caller. I would say you're going to have to, when you get a phone call, it is absolutely important that you call them back right away. The hottest deals require the fastest response.
So do I stop working that 9-to-5 job and tell my boss I have to step out? Do I call him back at the end of the day? Do I call him back 2 days later? How do I facilitate that if I don't think I have the time? Where do I find the time?
I have a student right now who has a 9-to-5 job. What he's been able to do is he basically just sneaks away. They have 2 15-minute breaks and a lunch break. He's doing direct mail, and he has matched the level of direct mail to accommodate his schedule. So he's not sending out, 6, 10, 15,000 pieces of mail in one shot. He's sending out smaller batches of mail and breaking them up over, different dates. And he's able to handle that level of calls during his 9-to-5. His goal is to save up $40,000. He's about halfway there. I think he's about $18,000 now. And then he's going to quit his 9-to-5 job. So I would say, sneak them in. Whatever scenario you create for yourself, I would definitely say if you have a motivated seller calling your voicemail, I would find a way to get back to them ASAP, even if you have a 9-to-5 job.
So take the time, make the time, grit, determination. And those seem to be the components that equal success. Someone that doesn't want to, in fact, won't, and someone who wants to will.
Right.
Getting back to who you are again. And I always find this question intriguing, and it certainly helps me from my side of the phone call. What's your last aha moment in real estate? The thing that you just, that's an aha moment that I didn't realize it until just now.
I would say the last kind of epiphany that I've had is that now that I am doing more deals, I am very, very good, and I've realized this, is that this works, is that when I first meet with a motivated seller, I would make a mistake of trying to convince them to do something. And what I have really found, Michael, is that if I mirror the seller, so what I do is I start to back away as soon as the seller backs away. And this is something that I've had to learn. So I would say that this is something that I realized, not too long ago. And I'm really very good about backing away immediately and, without any hesitation as soon as the seller starts to back away. So if I'm meeting with them, I will say, they'll say, well, they'll have an objection. And I'll say, well, this probably isn't a good fit for you. And so I was telling this to a buddy of mine, and what he said, which made a lot of sense, which really isn't a very appropriate analogy, but because the seller is certainly not a pet, but he says, it's like a dog, Tom. He said, if you chase a dog, it's going to run away from you. And if you run away from a dog, it's going to chase you. And he said, that's exactly how you got to be in the meetings with these sellers. And I would say that was definitely a huge aha moment for me, because that was something that I really now am like 100% dedicated to. If there's any hesitation, any objection whatsoever, I'm like out the door, and then they're chasing me.
So would that be some similar to like the takeaway close where, there's things that when I'm on an appointment, I'll say, I'm not saying I can, but if I could, which is a closing close. But then one of my takeaways is I can tell you that if we don't decide today, that I may take your money and go buy somebody else's house. Is it something like that, or are you just completely going nonchalantly saying, okay, you're telling me you don't want to sell. I'm going to tell you now I don't want to buy?
What I do is I've stopped trying to convince them at all. So I don't even get into a back and forth. As soon as I sense any hesitation whatsoever, I start to immediately back away. I'll close my portfolio. I'll say, well, listen, for instance, I literally just did this. There was a girl, her name was Nina. And I said, Nina, this doesn't sound like it's a good fit for you. I closed my portfolio. I stood up off of the kitchen table. I got up out of my chair and I said, but, I'll tell you what, if anything changes. And then she said, oh, no, I do want to sell, but I think we just need to, explore, I think it was a pricing objection. So I think she said something like, we have to look at what I'm going to walk away with, something to that effect. But that's what I do now. And I think that when you're confident and you do that the right way, it really will work. And when it doesn't work, I feel like it wouldn't have worked anyway, if that makes sense. Meaning that I don't know if I would have had to deal with this person regardless.
If it's a no, you can't change a no unless they want to change the no.
Right, exactly. And that's what I love. And that's why I always say be a deal finder, not a deal creator, because the bottom line is none of us that are ethical anyway, are going to be able to convince someone to sell their home at 60 cents on the dollar.
Well, I know I can create motivation as long as it's unreasonable motivation. So in fact, I know right now I can buy your house as long as I unreasonably paid for it.
Right.
I mean, there's not a piece of real estate in the country that you can't offer someone enough money to sell.
Okay.
But we can't create reasonable motivation.
Right. Exactly.
And so I'm a firm believer in that. That walk away or that disinterest behavior when you see that from a seller, I think is pretty magical for the new investor out there that's going, but maybe I don't have all the sales skills. And the fact that you're saying you're not selling anything, or you're not, you don't use sales skills to sell. If you can have normal conversation and understand that it's just normal conversation, and the seller who wants to sell us property at a percentage of value will raise their hand and tell you. So you mentioned something that I always think it's intriguing how unprepared a lot of people are. But you said you closed your portfolio. So what do you take with you?
What I don't take the contract with me. I leave the contract in the car, but I do take a portfolio, which is just a leather-bound little, it holds my notepad. And the reason I do that is when the seller is speaking, I am taking notes. So once we get done building rapport, which is the first thing I do when I walk into a seller's house, is I start to build rapport. After I build rapport and they start telling me things that are important to them, for instance, the seller will say, I was literally just at a house yesterday. I locked up a home, which it might be interesting for any of your listeners. The address is 110 Beach Avenue in Port St. Lucie. So it's a little 3-2 CBS home. I locked it up for $30,000. I sold it today for an assignment fee of $17,995. And the conversation.
Wait. That's more than $10,000.
Oh yeah, no, they're great. We get them all the way up to $25K. Absolutely.
So in a day or two, you can make almost $18,000.
Well, I didn't make it. I sold it. I flipped the paper. So the buyer left a non-refundable $5,000 deposit. We're going to close now in about a week. And then I just go to title and I pick up my check, and that's it.
This wholesaling thing sounds exciting. I mean, being a guy that's always bought the house and sold it for retail value, when I hear a wholesaler with so much enthusiasm about wholesaling and then can back it up with fact and earning potential, that's kind of cool. So if I wanted to learn this, and one of the things we started the conversation with is when you spoke about your brother out there in California, and I think you guys are across the country from one another. So I don't have to be in your backyard. I don't have to come into your kitchen every day to learn real estate investing. But if I wanted you to show me, one, do you help people? And secondly, how do I convince you, or do I have to just throw money at you? Do I have to beg you? Do I have to, watch your dog, or what do I have to do to learn real estate investing your way?
Sure. Well, I do have one-on-one coaching. I have done one group coaching, and that one went well. I will tell you, I have a great success rate with my students. I mean, we have students who I literally just coached a student who was up in New Jersey, and this person, he's hopefully going to be joining me on my next course. He's going to be helping me on the next course, but he just did $50,000 over 6 deals in his first 10 weeks using my system, which is fantastic. So I absolutely love it. And the way I do it is all through instruction. I don't believe in education, so I just tell you exactly what to do. That makes a lot of people uncomfortable, so I will have a preliminary conversation with students, but I tell you exactly what to do and how to do it. I have a website called Hot Seat Wholesaling and .com, and we're going to have the training course on there. It's great the way we came came up with hot seat wholesaling is that I started a RIA down in Port St. Lucie, and one thing that was so popular at the RIA was what we called the hot seat. And we would take a person in and we would ask them specifically about their deal, and we really got granular. Like, we want to know, how did you find the deal? How did you close the deal? What was the address? How much money did you make on the deal? How did you find the seller? What title company did you use? So we got the name from doing that because it was so popular. But yeah, the training course will be up there. Actually, what I'm going to do for your listeners, Michael, is if you'd like, I have a source of leads that I've been finding on the internet, on Craigslist, which you already know about. And there's kind of like the secret source of leads that nobody knows about. So I'll put a link to that on there for them. So anybody who wants to, is interested, they could actually get a hold of it.
And I'm going to interject for everybody that's listening. I think it's this incredible source of leads. So, and it's, I've been in the business for a couple of days now, and I've never heard of it being done on a on-purpose or in an on-purpose system. And the fact that, I always call them, anytime you can get I know it's a horrible word, but virgin leads, that's better. And a lead that no one else knows about, or the lead that qualifies to be a prospect, but you may or may not know it's a motivated prospect. Well, these are leads that are qualified to be a prospect, but probably have high motivation, and They're just untapped. I don't know a single other person in the country, and we send out millions of pieces of mail. There's no one else touching this lead group, and I don't know how you found it, how you came about it, and you don't need to share that. Just knowing that I can go to you and get these leads, I think is pretty magical for folks, especially those that really need to jumpstart their career and start. I mean, that's the biggest hurdle I hear a lot is, how long is it going to take? Well, this lead source to me seems like it's going to eliminate some of that length of starting time.
Absolutely. What I love about this lead source is that, it's so fantastic, right? Here's the deal. I call it like my perfect timing lead source, and it just produces insane results. But what I really like about it is, if you're just getting started. Now, I use yellow letters to handle this marketing channel for me of this new lead source that we found. But if you're just getting started and you have no money at all, you really can do this on your own until you generate enough income yourself. So all around, this is just a magical, wholesome, honest to goodness, great lead source for people who have enough grit and determination, or if you have some cash to actually throw into that channel. But it's fantastic. I love it. And I definitely, it's great.
I'm going to brag about it, but just half a second more. I remember marketing to the expireds, which are people that had a listing with a real estate agent at realtor that expired, and they were on the MLS offering their house for sale. They wanted to sell it. It didn't sell, so their contract expired, so they came off the market. I would get that list and I'd start marketing to it. And then I'd cross-check that list for all the people that had equity. So, because I didn't want to market to somebody who was upside down or had marginal equity because I couldn't make any money. So if I had that handful of folks, I'd still send them a letter, because in my career where I'm at, it's more cost-effective to send a letter than it is to get in my car and go knock on their front door.
Right.
Well, your lead source is equally as good as that expired listing that has equity that wanted to sell their house. You know who they are. You know where they are. You know their phone number, you know everything about them, and it's just a magical lead source. It's crazy that no one else did it.
Well, that's the other thing, is no one in my whole entire market is mailing to this list or contacting this list of leads. It's incredible, and it's something that, it's incredible. I absolutely love it. And additionally, it produces some of the largest assignment checks that I earn, which is fantastic. So yeah, I'll put that out on hotseatwholesaling.com, and if anybody wants to see it, or I know it's also on your site where they can sign up on yellowletters.com. So it's great though.
And we'll put a link on our site as well. But what's a real estate investor?
A real estate investor to me is someone who can create win-win situations for people who need their help. And what I mean by that is, for people who there is a need in the market, just like there's a need for pawn shops, there are people who need to be able to work with cash buyers to quickly move real estate transactions. And a true real estate investor to me is a person who can create that win-win situation for all the parties involved.
Amen. Well, Tom, it's been absolutely fun and fantastic and enjoyable listening to you and hearing you. And it's something I learned a ton.
Awesome.
And I'm an old dog, so it was very enjoyable. I appreciate it. And folks, call Tom. You'll be able to get his links on the website. Check out his new lead source. And if you're entering this business and you need a coach or a mentor, absolutely fall forward and contact him.
Terrific. I appreciate Michael.
Thanks for listening to the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show. Get more info and stay in touch at michaelquarles.com.